Well, it's the end of the year, and I like to always have a chat with various people about how it's reflected in the island overall. And it's nice to have Phil Gawne with us because you kind of now being outside government can look back in. Although you're fairly busy, you seem to be clerk of every place in the south of the island or something.
I'm certainly. I've got some clerking roles, but obviously I'm not here as clerk or to represent local authorities.
But how do you? I mean, I think I asked you before, but it's been a good year now. Do you miss this, the cut and the thrust and making those decisions?
No, not really. Yeah, politics is an incredibly complicated and difficult business, and yeah, as we go through this discussion, no doubt there'll be a little bit of criticism thrown in here, there, and everywhere. But my respect for anybody who is fortunate enough to be a member of the House of Keys, it knows no bounds, because it is an incredibly difficult job. Whatever you do, inevitably you're going to be wrong at some point. Usually when you're making the right decisions for the right reasons, that's the time that the public often turn on you the most, because it's those decisions that are the most complicated, the most difficult to explain, are the ones that you just can't win with. So in that situation, if politics was simple, I mean, I was watching, there was a fantastic programme on Sky recently, the Babylon Berlin. I don't know if you've seen it. It's in German, English subtitles, but it was all about that time in the late 1920s, early 30s, where there was loads of politics going on, and it was all sort of high level stuff. It was, I think, there was the right wing, there was the left wing, it was all this melting pot of politics all happening in Berlin, and it's exciting, and you think, wouldn't it be nice to be rounded at a time where you were talking that sort of high level, principled stuff, rather than the day-to-day drudgery, complex, how do you resolve really difficult situations where there is no right answer, and whatever you come up with.
We'll come to the problem later.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, obviously, if things had been different, you were probably in the running to be Chief Minister. You could have been, long term, that sort of thing. But you're not, and you're watching it from the sidelines. What sort of view do you get as a member of the public? Let's treat you as that. Looking at how Howard Quayle and co have done this year.
I have to say, I did give the caveat when I came on this programme that I haven't been following Manx politics as closely as I would have done for the last 12 years.
I find that surprising. Well, I don't believe you can just switch off.
Yeah, been a willful thing to try and just, because you're so extraordinarily involved with it that you just have to take a complete break to get to sort of escape from it. But that said, yeah, I have been following politics. I think Howard's biggest mistake, Chief Minister's biggest mistake, is appearing to pin his colours to Brexit. Now, I can understand from Howard's point of view that Brexit is a massive threat to the Isle of Man, potentially opportunity, but I think more of a threat than an opportunity. But inevitably, you look at the disarray in the UK, particularly in London, over what Brexit really means. Brexit means Brexit, but nobody really seems to have much of a clue. They don't really know what it is that they want. This fantastic news that we're all going to have blue passports when they used to be black, and then they were burgundy, and now we're going to have our blue ones back again. And you think, so the whole complexity of that seems to me to be something that, whatever happens, it's not going to be a particularly good scenario, at least for the next 5 or 10 years. So the Chief Minister being seen to be so keen to sort of take on Brexit, and that's going to be his big thing, seems to me to be a bit of a mistake on his part.
But he's going to London all the time, him and goodness knows how many other people, and meeting people. But these are people that are passing the night themselves, aren't they? Know everyone's rudderless, aren't they? Until they know what's going on.
And again, I suspect it's more about the way this is portrayed, and I don't think it's been portrayed particularly well. What obviously we need in the Isle of Man is a really strong, robust and sustainable, long-term sustainable economy. So you get things like the Paradise Papers coming in, which, whilst in terms of technicalities, we're absolutely right. We haven't broken laws. We're squeaky clean. We're topping all these various lists. The real issue in terms of Paradise Papers is the the perception of people living in the UK, which is there are lots of rich people getting away without paying their taxes, and as a consequence, we, the populace, are being forced to have poorer services, the more and more cuts, and taxes going up. That's the way that people perceive this. So cheap entertainment programs like Panorama, running their Paradise Papers story, just pander to that perception, which, whilst, yeah, you know, in terms of all the box ticking, OECD, all this sort of stuff, we're right up there. How do you overcome the real issue, which is that public perception across most of Europe, let alone the UK, that rich people are dodging taxes, and the Isle of Man is allowing that to happen?
Public perception, as you said there, on that programme, the Isle of Man was way up there. I mean, I don't think Guernsey even got a look in, but, you know, but what do you think to the Chief Minister going on that programme? I mean, because that after we had that press conference the day before, which, you know, one of the most viewed things ever, but all I was getting was information that he shouldn't have done it. He's stood by it. He's given me quite a lot of flack off you know, thing about that we covered the press conference, which I find, you know, obviously another subject for another day. But the point is, would you have done that? Would you have been, if you'd been advised to do it or whatever, would you have gone on that television programme and played into their hands, if that's even right?
It's always a difficult one, isn't it? If you don't, then they can just make up whatever they want anyway. I mean, they sort of were doing that anyway.
Did it not give them something to base the Isle of Man around? Because, I mean, Jersey, Guernsey didn't put their chief ministers into that show, did they?
But I have to say that once we sort of overcame the debacle, which was the pre-run press conference, at which the Chief Minister sort of accused the Manx press of not being serious press, whereas in fact, when it came to it, you look at the Panorama guy, and it was quite clear that he wasn't serious press. He was determined that he had a story. He wasn't interested in anyone else's point of view or evidence. He was just going to plough forward with his story regardless of the facts. And actually, the Manx press, in my experience, have always been very good at you know, getting to the truth of the matter. So once you overcame that bit of the Chief Minister's mishandling, I think beyond that, I think he did the right thing going on the programme, and I think the coverage that he generally managed to get out of that programme, you know, going on the Today programme with John Humphreys and coming out the winner, is not something that many politicians managed to do, and Howard clearly did on that occasion. So yeah, a very bad start, but I think it was rescued.
Are you picking up on the fractions over there? Because, I mean, after that next morning, when he was done on Radio 4, he also went on the state broadcaster, and then followed by that, we had the finance minister, Mr. Cannon, and he didn't seem to quite back up Howard. And everyone kind of picked that up. Although the interview didn't. Funny enough, they didn't. They let it slide. But do you get the impression that it's not unity in government then?
I think it never is. I mean, there's never unity. I mean, this whole
well, no, you and Alan Bell, we can see it for hours and talk about it, couldn't we?
The whole myth of unity in government, you know, but. What you are there for is to try and work with colleagues to make things work. And in terms of what I hear, and I regularly do meet ministers and other politicians, I believe that council ministers and Tynwald seem to be working more closely and more effectively as a team than they've ever been before.
Everyone's saying that, yeah.
There is a question as to whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, and I think perhaps those who aren't ministers need to have a little bit more of a think about how, you know, yes, a professional relationship is a good thing, but the public expect Tynwald to hold government to account. One of the big stories really of 2017 is the Lisfane report, and ultimately perhaps the biggest story is the way in which that Lisfane report, certainly in my view, and I was always a very keen reformer of Tynwald. In my view, the Lisfane report was pushed onto the dustiest of back shelves, never to be really seen again, which I think is a big disappointment. You know, you have to have that separation between government and scrutiny. You need to be much clearer. And you know, this is me kind of calling the kettle black, because as a minister, I would have been delighted if backbenchers would have all sort of gathered to my particular cause rather than asking awkward questions all the time. But that's what you actually need in a healthy functioning democracy. And this again is what worries me when I hear some sort of comments about perhaps government should take editorial control. I mean, that was discussed about the Paradise Papers. I mean, for goodness sake, government taking editorial control.
That was Chris Thomas, was it? No,
I think
it wasn't. It was Castletown, wasn't it?
Yeah, Jason.
Sorry.
I think he might have.
Thomas,
he might have been misquoted, or he may have been taken out of context. But that sort of.
I'm not sure if he meant editorial control for programs like Panorama, or more editorial controls of press conferences, because obviously that press conference, we covered it and we put everything out, and that's where we got into interesting moments with government, because they think we shouldn't have done it. And I'm going, well, we're here just to,
absolutely,
we're just a messenger.
It does need to be broadcast, and actually, when if ever government was so stupid as to go down that route, I think.
Well, they're trying to manipulate press conferences a little bit ever since that. I understand. We have yet to have a moment, but I'm telling you, I think I've said it already. If they tell us we can't film something, then we will just withdraw ourselves, because you can't be manipulated or certainly controlled.
But then on the other hand, we've got regular questions. Obviously, I have to declare an interest. My son now working at Manx Radio, but I mean, I would have said this whether he was working there or wherever he was. But I worry when particularly some of the newer politicians are asking questions about the Manx Radio subvention. I think that what they're getting at is perhaps we should just have the BBC money, the £1 million that we spend.
I think that's what Manx Radio want. They want to have like an S4C model.
If that was given to Manx Radio instead, I think that would be fine. But when you have government and ministers and backbenchers working more closely than they've ever had before, that is a time that you need a strong independent media to scrutinise what government's actually up to.
And not state media then?
Not this situation where the government or the ministers and the backbenchers seem to be clubbing together to say we need to cut the subvention, which then makes the state broadcaster perhaps think to itself, well, gosh, we can't risk any negative stories.
Do you feel there's tummy tickling interviews going on there? And I call them that in that sense of a light interview sometimes.
Perhaps. I mean, some of it, of course, is
depends on the person.
It's the time, and actually, we talk about Manx Radio. The Isle of Man newspapers are just the same in terms of the amount of government support they get through the indirect subsidy of most government notices having to be published in the newspapers.
I thought it's all online these days. But
but the law still requires. Certainly that was the case up to a year ago anyway. And it's still quite a substantial sum, hundreds of thousands of pounds of government money each year has to go by law into the newspapers, unless they've changed something in the last few months.
Well, what do you think to the fact that I think we were behind it quite a bit to get coverage inside Tynwald? We haven't done House of Keys yet because we haven't got audio sorted, but if they get audio we can do that. But it took a long time for this to happen, for me to be able to go back in there and actually plug in and get the sound system. But since October, after the recess, we've covered Question Time. We can't do them all, by the way, so it's not going to be a regular thing. But I suppose the question is, do you think it should be? Do you think there should be money put into covering these events and seeing the politicians in action?
Yeah, I do, and I always supported it, and I always felt it was worth, if we needed to spend £100,000 to televise the Tynwald sittings, then that's exactly what we needed to do, because most people access their news through video on the internet nowadays. They don't read newspapers to the extent they used to. They don't even listen to the state broadcaster or to Manx Radio as regularly perhaps as they used to do. So having video clips of people giving answers in Parliament in Tynwald, I think is entirely the right sort of thing to do. We should do more of it. It's back to this: if it ain't broke, don't fix it question. And this is the same response that's been flooded out or dribbled out, whatever the word is, in relation to Lisfane. Parliament, we've had this fantastic Parliament for 1,000 years. Why would we want to break our heritage? And anyone with any sort of knowledge of how the Tynwald has developed knows that LegCo in particular has only really existed in its current form for the last 40 or 50 years. And for most of the last century, there was radical reform of LegCo and Tynwald. And it's only this last 10 years, really, that we haven't done very much by way of constitutional reform. And it is broke because less than half the people of the Isle of Man are bothering to turn out to vote in elections. You know, there is an increasing disinterest in what is described as local politics. So it's broke. Something has to change. Getting the likes of your broadcasts from Tynwald is a massive and important
It's not getting big numbers, but it's getting solid numbers.
Yeah.
I think it's something that's, I find it very important that we should be doing it. But
yeah, but it's that kind of thing. More of that kind of thing is what's needed. People need to you know, I don't know, I keep saying this. Maybe I am still passionately interested in Manx politics, I don't know, but I think more people need to be interested in politics and perhaps to dig a bit deeper and understand it.